Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with Cindy Chavez. Today is Wednesday, April the 10th, 2019. It is 4 p.m. here in New York. It is 1 p.m. in Los Angeles, 9 p.m. in London. Sydney, Australia, you're at about 6 a.m. I've actually have started recalculating my Sydney time because I was getting it wrong. But I checked it this time, Cindy. I know for sure that it is 6 a.m. in Sydney, Australia. So, but wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And in many places around the world, Wednesday is Hump Day, but here on LOA Today, it's Neville Day. We get to talk about Neville Goddard. We do that once a week, and we've been doing it for a few months now, like what, 6, 7, 8 months, something like that. I mean, and we've been through some books. Yeah. It's been quite a few, and it's good. But I look forward to it now. It becomes like the highlight of the week in some ways, so. Thank you for doing it with me. I appreciate it. Yeah, it is good.
You're welcome.
How have you been? You doing well, I hope?
We're doing great. And like I said, it's sunny and 85 degrees here. Everything is blooming and it's wonderful. So I think winter is over.
At least in the South.
For us, yeah.
Yes, right.
We wait to see if the pecan trees bud because that's how you know.
Okay. That's the clue.
Once the pecan trees start to bud, then it looks like it's the end of winter. So
we're
enjoying it. It's beautiful and no snow for us. So
beautiful.
Yeah, but everything's going great, and I'm excited to be talking about Neville. Took a sneak peek ahead at chapter 18, and oh boy, he's going to get into some some Neville-ish ideas.
Neville-ish ideas. I like that. Yeah. Well, he's good at that. That's what we count on him for. Let's see. People are just kind of filtering in there. This will be, as usual, the opportunity for Q&A. So if anyone is listening, wants to add questions or bring up like subtopics as we're talking about Neville, feel free to type them into the comment section. If you're listening to the live stream, obviously, if you're listening to the podcast, that's not quite so easy. But we welcome the input, and we invite people to participate and share their insights and share their questions because that makes the discussion so much more interesting. And
it doesn't have to be about Neville. I mean, once we get started with Neville, hopefully we can keep on track. But to open the show, if you have questions, just law of attraction questions in general, any kind of questions, we're happy to answer them.
That's always fun. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. So without further adu, then, I don't really have any messages that I need to put up front. I'll do my usual invitations to subscribe toward the end, but unless you've got something, why don't we just get going? Okay,
well, we can dive right in. We are working our way slowly but surely through Neville Goddard's book, Your Faith is Your Fortune, and we are on chapter 18. And if you're a new listener, you'll have to understand that Neville often uses a lot of scriptures from the Christian Bible, verses from the Christian Bible, and he also has a very esoteric of defining what they mean, probably not the norm that you've ever heard. So, especially in this book, I think, and it stands to reason with the title, Your Faith is Your Fortune, but I think that a large portion of his live audience, he used to give lots of lectures, were Christians, and he gave these lectures in churches. And so, that's where he goes with it. And this week he's talking about, the chapter title is The 12 Disciples. Of course, he's speaking of Jesus' disciples. And that's where we're going to begin. So
I
somehow
he's going to make this relevant to us. I got to make one comment before we go, because it just occurred to me. There was a discussion somewhere on Facebook a few days back. I can't remember exactly what it was about. But someone had mentioned Neville and had provided a link to a YouTube video of the guy about whom the story was told in Neville's writings. This is the guy who manifested the Arthur Murray studio. Remember the guy who wanted to get the franchise? Yeah. It was him telling his story to, he's up there in years now, and he was telling his story to somebody who was holding a smartphone, looked like an Android-style phone. And basically, I think it may have been a relative. I'm not sure, maybe a son or something like that. But he was telling the story, and two interesting takeaways from it. Well, three interesting takeaways, actually. One interesting takeaway, you mentioned how Neville was talking to a Christian audience of the time. I have to tell you, based on this guy's language, he was not your typical Christian. he was let's just say, colorful in the way that he expressed himself. And you listen to it and you realize that Neville actually had a fairly wide audience. I mean, yes, he was certainly lecturing to a Christian audience, but he was picking up a lot of passersby who weren't necessarily in that Christian community. And you could tell just from
if I recall correctly, that particular person, and now I can't remember what book that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which book that was. Yeah.
But the person that told that story was feeling like they needed a shift, needed a change, and suddenly remembered a book that they had on their bookshelf, one of Neville's books.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been Feeling is the Secret.
Could have been, yeah.
I'm uncertain about which one it was. I remember reading it, and he said it was on his bookshelf, and he remembered reading it at one time and that it was really effective, but then he just had put it back and hadn't even thought of it for a long time. And I can't remember where he got it, so it's interesting. I'd love to know that now, right now that you've told me that. It's like, okay, he didn't hear Neville in church.
No.
Somehow he got this Neville book, yeah.
Well, he did hear Neville, but he heard him in some, I think it was a church, actually, on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles.
Oh.
Which is really interesting,
okay.
yeah. And
yeah.
He went to the thing because it was recommended to him by a friend who's, and at the time he was struggling, didn't have a lot of money coming in, his prospects weren't looking so good and so forth. And his friend talked him into going to it. And he said, as he's going into the door, he's thinking to himself, okay, so what's this guy's angle going to be to try to get money out of me? And he made a point of saying the very first thing that Neville said when he was addressing the audience was, I want to get this one thing out of the way right now, and that is there will be no collection plate passed. Which I thought was really interesting. And then the other thing, remember the analogy that Neville uses of the ladder to explain how you visualize really clearly and put yourself into the visualization? Well, in this particular talk, Neville told the audience that particular analogy, but he told it to them as an instruction for something to do. He says, what I want you to do is I want you to do two things. First of all, I want you, for the next 3 nights before you go to bed, to visualize, and what was it he was going to visualize? Oh, yes. I want you to visualize yourself climbing the ladder. And what you're going to do is you're going to imagine the ladder in front of you, and with your imaginary left hand, you're going to grab the left-hand side, and with your imaginary right hand, you're going to grab the right-hand side, and with your imaginary left foot, you're going to put your left foot on the first rung, and you're going to work your way up the ladder that way. I want you to visualize that as you're going to sleep for the next 3 nights. And this is the really interesting part, and what I want you to do is during the day, I want you to write notes and put them on the wall, put one in your wallet, and say, I will never, ever climb a ladder again. Because I want to prove to you how powerful this process is. So I want you to swear you will never climb a ladder again, but I also want you to do this exercise every night for the next 3 nights of dreaming you're climbing a ladder. And only those of you who do this and experience something akin to what I'm talking about that shows you this stuff really works, you are the only ones who are invited back next Sunday.
What?
This is what this guy was... Now, I don't know that Neville actually did this. This is this guy's story about what happened when he went to the Neville, okay? So he was very suspicious. He didn't really believe it, but he said, oh, well, I'll give it a try. I'll try it out. So he did exactly what Neville suggested. And the following Saturday, he got a phone call from his mom saying, we need some help around the house. Would you come here? He says, sure, okay. He goes to the house. His father's up on the roof and says, son, would you hand me that can of paint down there? He says, oh, sure. And he grabs the paint, climbs the ladder, and hands it to him and says, oh, my God, I just climbed the ladder.
That's so funny.
So he had sworn, he said, I'm not going to climb a ladder. Despite that, he managed to convince himself subconsciously that he was going to climb a ladder, and he climbed a ladder. So he was convinced enough to go back the following week. The following week he went back, and that's when Neville gave a more direct, intimate talk on teaching the people who had come back, and it was a much smaller audience at that point, but teaching them all the specifics about how to do his stuff. And he said within weeks of that is when he manifested the Arthur Murray Studio franchise that he was trying to manifest.
Wow. I'm so glad you told me that story. That's great.
Isn't that interesting?
That's great. Yeah.
I was really fascinated about how he was directly contradicting it. I mean...
Well, I'm like, okay, so all of the affirmations on Post-its apparently aren't quite as effective as what we program ourselves to be believing as we're falling asleep. That's been Neville's thing from the beginning.
It has.
That, right, as you're falling asleep, for you to imagine whatever, the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So,
yes.
That's really great. I love it.
And then I won't detail, for those who are interested, I'll try to find a link. Send me a Facebook message and I'll send you a link to it, because I don't really want to detail what he said in the interview. But what I will say is, while he was being filmed telling these stories, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a book with a red cover. It was his cover. It was his copy of The Law and the Promise, and it was autographed by Neville Goddard.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Yeah, really, really cool.
So, The Law and the Promise may be the book that had all the story. One of the books that we've read, and I get them confused, we've done so many, but one of them had in the back, or in the latter half of the book, it had a lot of success stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't, well, we haven't done The Law and the Promise. We haven't gotten to that one yet. So I know it's not that one.
But there was one book that has success stories in it that I pulled some stories out, and we read those on the air.
Yes.
We didn't read the book. So that was one of the stories that was in that book.
It was. And the interesting, this is also part of the video. He says during the video that Neville sent him a letter asking him to write a testimonial for him. And the testimonial he wrote was the story that was included in the book.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so was that not The Law and the Promise?
He didn't say where it was used. He just said that Neville asked him for a testimonial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can find it if anybody wants to know, because we covered that one before, but that's fantastic.
Isn't that interesting?
How cool.
Yeah.
We've been saying that, right? We've been saying, like, where are these people now? Like, we'd like to hear from them now.
Well, this guy's still, a few years ago, this is like 6-7 years ago that this thing was filmed, but he was still alive. He was still kicking.
So see, you manifested that YouTube video because you were like, I want to hear from these people.
Exactly.
There he is.
Yeah, there it was. It was awesome. Wild. So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just had to tell you that story.
No, I'm glad you did. I wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
So just checking one more time. Do we have any questions before we get started?
Nope. We're quiet on the board, so go ahead.
All right. So we're going to begin with Neville's chapter, The 12 Disciples. He starts with a verse from the Christian Bible, and when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits, to cast them out, and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. Then Neville says, the 12 disciples represent the 12 qualities of mind which should be controlled and disciplined by man. If disciplined, they will at all times obey the command of the one who has disciplined them. These 12 qualities in man are potentials of every mind. Undisciplined, their actions resemble more the actions of a mob than they do of a trained and disciplined army. All the storms and confusions that engulf man can be traced directly to these 12 ill-related characteristics of the human mind in its present slumbering state. Until they are awakened, disciplined, they will permit every rumor and sensuous emotion to move them. When these 12 are disciplined and brought under control, the one who accomplishes this control will say to them, hereafter I call you not slaves, but friends. He knows that from that moment on, each acquired, disciplined attribute of mind will befriend and protect. The names of the 12 qualities reveal their natures. These names are not given to them until they are called to discipleship. They are Simon, who was later surnamed Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas. The first quality to be called and disciplined is Simon, or the attribute of hearing. This faculty, when lifted to the level of a disciple, permits only such impressions to reach consciousness as those which his hearing has commanded him to let enter. No matter what the wisdom of man might suggest or the evidence of his senses convey, if such suggestions and ideas are not in keeping with that which he hears, he remains unmoved. This one has been instructed by his Lord and made to understand that every suggestion he permits to pass his gate will, on reaching his Lord and Master, his consciousness, leave its impression there, which impression must in time become an expression. The instruction to Simon is that he should permit only dignified and honorable visitors or impressions to enter the house, consciousness, of his Lord. No mistake can be covered up or hidden from his Master, for every expression of life tells his Lord whom he consciously or unconsciously entertained. When Simon, by his works, proves to be a true and faithful disciple, then he receives the surname of Peter, or the Rock, the unmoved disciple, the one who cannot be bribed or coerced by any visitor. He is called by his Lord Simon Peter, the one who faithfully hears the commands of his Lord, and besides which commands he hears not. It is this Simon Peter who discovers the I Am to be Christ, and for his discovery is given the keys to heaven, and is made the foundation stone upon which the temple of God rests. Buildings must have firm foundations, and only the disciplined hearing can, on learning that the I Am is Christ, remain firm and unmoved in the knowledge that I am Christ, and beside me there is no Savior. So that's the first quality Neville talks about, is hearing. Any thoughts?
Well, yeah. First of all, he's reduced the 12 disciples to attributes. They are no longer human beings, which is that alone is a little bit shocking for anybody who's a Christian devotee, shall we say. So you have to kind of get over that.
That's Neville.
That is Neville, all over. Yes.
Yeah.
And interesting that he describes Simon as hearing, because that is the key attribute that Peter, the character in the biblical story, demonstrates. He's listening. He listens all the time. So it makes sense. I mean, it just kind of fits the storyline. But wow, I mean, I can't say that I ever heard anyone go in this direction with the 12 disciples. So this is new.
No, me either. And what I take away from it that's so Neville is the idea that he talks about what he permits to pass through the gate, so to speak. It's kind of like that he only hears the things that are supporting his goals or intentions.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
It's like, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. If it's not in line with what he's creating, he doesn't hear it, or he doesn't accept it. It doesn't get through the gate. That's what it sounds like so much that he's taught before, but just not using this example.
Yes. Yes.
It almost is like he's not calling it a metaphor, but
no, but it is, and it's interesting. This is the first book that he wrote and published, and it's interesting because there's a whole lot of Neville decoder ring stuff in here that you have to understand. And I'm trying to think, did he set all this up earlier in the chapters of this book? I think he set a large amount of it up. Maybe he set all of it up.
Yes.
Maybe he defined all of it. But boy, oh boy, I mean, really, it's helpful to have gone through the other books and have the decoder ring and understand what all of the mixes and matches are and how this equals that, equals that, equals that. Because if you don't have that and you're reading this, you're saying, what the bleep is he talking about?
Right? I get the sense it's like, I'm glad this wasn't my first Neville book.
Right.
Because, I might not have picked it back up.
Oh, my goodness.
So bear with us.
Yes. Bear with Neville.
All right. So if you're making a list, that first one was hearing. The quality was hearing. And the second quality to be called to discipleship is Andrew, or courage. As the first quality, faith in oneself, is developed, it automatically calls into being its brother, courage. So he's told us that Simon Peter's quality was hearing, but now he's saying faith in oneself. Mm-hmm. And I think he's aligning them because he's making the note that the person doesn't hear anything that's not going to be in alignment with what he's doing or what he's creating. That's faith in yourself. When everyone else is saying something different and you're not hearing it, that's faith. So he says, as the first quality, faith in oneself is developed, it automatically calls into being its brother, courage. Faith in oneself, which asks no man's help, but quietly and alone appropriates the consciousness of the quality desired and, in spite of reason or the evidence of his senses to the contrary, continues faithful, patiently waiting in the knowledge that his unseen claim, if sustained, must be realized. Such faith develops a courage and strength of character that are beyond the wildest dreams of the undisciplined man whose faith is in things seen. The faith of the undisciplined man cannot really be called faith. For if the armies, medicines, or wisdom of man in which his faith is placed be taken from him, his faith and courage go with it. But from the disciplined one, the whole world could be taken, and yet he would remain faithful in the knowledge that the state of consciousness in which he abides must, in due season, embody itself. This courage is Peter's brother Andrew, the disciple who knows what it is to dare, to do, and to be silent.
Interesting ending there. To dare, to do, and be silent in the context of courage, and that's in the context.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because to dare, to do, and to be silent is a tenet of magic.
Oh, is it really? I didn't know that.
It's like, showing up here, interesting.
Well, also, this whole thing about Andrew is about faith in oneself. So this is a very specific kind of courage. And it's probably,
yes.
I like the order. The order makes total sense to me because the very first thing we run up against when we're trying to learn to be deliberate creators is believing in ourselves. So it makes total sense that he's going to address this, and he's going to recognize that it takes courage to take on this Andrew face, this Andrewness, and that what you're really doing, and this is where that ending comes in to me in a big way, and what you're really doing when you're taking that on is you are learning to dare, to do, and to be silent. And the be silent part means you're doing it quietly within yourself. You're not broadcasting it all over the place necessarily. You could, but that's not the point of what he's trying to make. The main point is you're doing it internally. It's a quiet conversation. It's not something that everybody else is privy to.
I like the way he connects these two things together because I do think it takes a level of courage to have faith.
It does.
And yet he is saying that once we start to develop our faith, that the courage will develop almost as a result of having faith. So I think that I agree with you. It's a good order.
Mm-hmm. And it matches what we've learned from other teachers. I mean, Abraham tells us that the more we think about and focus on something, it becomes a belief, and it becomes a stronger and stronger belief over time. Well, the same thing is true about faith, about belief itself. You know, the more that you focus on it, the more you believe in it, the more you trust it, and the more courageous you become about it. It's a courage in this sense is like confidence. You have confidence in what it is that you're believing.
Right. Not so much bravery.
Right.
Although it could be.
Well, depending on your circumstances, it might be brave to do something like this. Yeah, right. It could be.
So he says the next two, the third and fourth, so we've got hearing, faith in oneself, courage. The next two, third and fourth, who are called, are also related. These are the brothers James and John. James the just, the righteous judge, and his brother John, the beloved. Justice, to be wise, must be administered with love, ever turning the other cheek and at all times returning good for evil, love for hate, nonviolence for violence. The disciple James, symbol of a disciplined judgment, must, when raised to the high office of a supreme judge, be blindfolded that he may not be influenced by the flesh nor judge after the appearance of being. Disciplined judgment is administered by one who is not influenced by appearances. The one who has called these brothers to discipleship continues faithful to his command to hear only that which he has been commanded to hear, namely, the good. The man who has this quality of his mind disciplined is incapable of hearing and accepting as true anything, either of himself or another, which does not on the hearing fill his heart with love. These two disciples, or aspect of the mind, are one and inseparable when awakened. Such a disciplined one forgives all men for being that which they are. He knows as a wise judge that every man perfectly expresses that which he is, as man, conscious of being. He knows that upon the changeless foundation of consciousness, all manifestation rests. That changes of expression can be brought about only through changes of consciousness. And when Neville talks about expression, he's talking about manifestation, right? Mm-hmm. Now, he's not talking about an expression on your face. He's talking about what gets impressed in your subconscious, then becomes expressed outwardly as a physical manifestation or a reality. So the changes of expression can be brought about only through changes of consciousness.
Right. Yeah.
With neither condemnation...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, finish the section because we need to have the whole thing, I think.
With neither condemnation nor criticism, these disciplined qualities of the mind permit everyone to be that which he is. However, though allowing this perfect freedom of choice to all, are nevertheless ever watchful to see that they themselves prophesy and do, both for others and themselves, only such things which when expressed glorify, dignify, and give joy to the expressor. I hear Neville here talking about when he says, with neither condemnation nor criticism, these disciplined qualities of the mind permit everyone to be that which he is. So it's like, you get to be whoever you want to be. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets to do their own thing. Everybody gets to live how they want to live. Then he says, however, although allowing this perfect freedom of choice to all, they're nevertheless ever watchful that they themselves prophesy and do, or speak and do, say and do, words and actions, both for others and themselves. So even these ones who have their freedom of choice, only such things which when expressed glorify, dignify, and give joy to the expressor. What I hear him saying is that I'm not going to condemn or criticize somebody for living in a way that's their choice, making decisions that are their choice. It's all their choices. They get to do what they want to do. But I'm not going to talk about them in ways that don't bring dignity and glory and joy to them.
Yep, that's true.
The ones that are expressing these things. And that's a lot easier said than done, right?
Oh, it is.
Somebody was just having a conversation with me in the last couple of days, and they were talking about a situation where they were with a group of people, and the people started talking about somebody in a way that wasn't bringing joy or dignity, right, to the person, and how easy it is to just kind of go, oh yeah, and just kind of pile in, and how difficult it is sometimes to be the one that stays silent, or be the one that just gets up and goes and gets a drink refill or whatever, and just doesn't join in. But that's what it sounds like Neville's talking about to me. Do you have any other ideas about it?
I agree with you. I was struck by his original description of James and John themselves, particularly James, saying that James is James the just, the righteous judge, and he uses the word judgment quite a few times, and he's using it in a way that I applaud, actually, and that is not normally used in typical conversation. We usually talk about judgment in terms of looking critically upon somebody or something, but he's using judgment in quite a different way, because the judgment he's talking about is looking for, let's see, how does he say it here? Let's see. Justice to the wise must be administered with love, ever turning the other cheek, and at all times returning good for evil, love for hate, nonviolence for violence, which is not the way we normally think about judgment. But literally, it is the way I think we should think about judgment. I think it's the better way to think about judging, because that's the kind of judging that is actually more along the lines of, what do I prefer? What do I want in life? What do I see as my ideal life, and who do I want to live with who has the same or similar kinds of ideals and so forth? What kind of abundant life am I creating for myself? that to me is the judgment that he's talking about. And I applaud it. I like it.
Right. So he's using judgment, but he says he's not being critical.
Right.
And neither is he bringing any kind of condemnation. So
right.
That's the part I think that people get tripped up about.
It's almost revolutionary the way he's doing that.
We often use the term judgment to mean that very thing, right? Like people will say, "Oh, I don't mean to be judgy,"
and then they proceed to be judgy
right before they say something that's condemning. Or
right.
Yeah, right. So I'm looking through here because I grabbed a pen. I wanted to make this list. So we've got hearing, which is drawn an equivalent there with having faith in yourself. Courage, judgment, and justice.
Right.
The brothers.
An interesting thing about John, I kind of skipped over John, but he makes a reference to John, and then he doesn't really follow up on it. So it makes me think it's an important reference, but one that just doesn't get attention. Because he says that James is the judge.
Calls John the beloved.
John the beloved, yeah.
And at the point where he's talking about judgment not having, condemnation, he goes on to talk about returning nonviolence for violence.
Right.
And I think that's the beloved part, right? It's like he says the man who has this quality of mind, disciplined, is incapable of hearing and accepting as true anything, either of himself or other, which does not on the hearing fill his heart with love.
I agree with you. What caught my attention about it,
love.
the fact that he chose the word beloved. I mean, everything else he described there was about offering love, but the beloved is someone who's the recipient of love. And that's what the hidden message is. That's the one that caught my attention. Because basically he's saying the one who puts out all the love becomes the recipient of love, which makes sense, but you have to kind of read between the lines to see, oh, wait a minute, that's really what he's saying there.
Yeah, and it really makes sense in this context.
Yeah,
that
very much.
What we focus on expands, what we put out, the vibration we put out is the one that comes back.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Very cool.
Okay, so fifth quality called to discipleship is Philip. This one asked to be shown the Father. The awakened man knows that the Father is the state of consciousness in which man dwells, and that this state, or Father, can be seen only as it is expressed. He knows himself to be the perfect likeness or image of that consciousness with which he is identified. So he declares, "No man has at any time seen my Father, but I, the Son, who dwelleth in his bosom, have revealed him." No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten God who is in the bosom of the Father, he has explained him. And I'm looking because there are a lot of brackets in my version here that are unnecessary because they're just repetitive. So I think that's the main verse there. I and my Father, consciousness and its expression, God and man, are one. This aspect of the mind, when disciplined, persists until ideas, ambitions, and desires become embodied realities. This is the quality which states, "Yet in my flesh shall I see God." It knows how to make the word flesh. It knows how to give form to the formless. So this is I don't know how to put this one in one word, but it's the recognition that it's I am, right? It's the recognition that I am is consciousness, is that I and the Father are one, as he says.
Yes.
So that consciousness and its expression are the same thing.
Right. Yes, God and man are one. That's reiterating a point he's made before, but now he's really hammering it home. And once again, a little bit tough for somebody who is a traditional Christian, but for those of us who have our decoder rings on, it makes sense because that's what he keeps telling us over and over again.
So we've got so far hearing that shows itself as faith in self that starts to result in courage. We've got judgment and justice and then love. Those are actually just two things. And then the I am, the recognition that we are one with God, that we are the creators. That's 5. And then the 6th disciple is called Bartholomew. This quality is the imaginative faculty, which quality of the mind, when once awake, distinguishes one from the masses. An awakened imagination places the one so awakened head and shoulders above the average man, giving him the appearance of a beacon light in a world of darkness. No quality so separates man from man as does the disciplined imagination. This is the separation of the wheat from the chaff. Those who have given most to society are our artists, scientists, inventors, and others with vivid imaginations. Should a survey be made to determine the reason why so many seemingly educated men and women fail in their after-college years, or should it be made to determine the reason for the different earning powers of the masses, there would be no doubt but that imagination played the important part. Such a survey would show that it is imagination which makes one a leader, while the lack of it makes one a follower. That's a strong statement.
Very. Yeah.
Instead of developing the imagination of man, our educational system oftentimes stifles it by attempting to put into the mind of man the wisdom he seeks. It forces him to memorize a number of textbooks, which all too soon are disproved by later textbooks. Education is not accomplished by putting something into man. Its purpose is to draw out of man the wisdom which is latent within him. May the reader call Bartholomew to discipleship, for only as this quality is raised to discipleship will you have the capacity to conceive ideas that will lift you beyond the limitations of man.
Now, there's a new thought that he's got there. He has a new thought here. I just realized it. He was saying, let's see, where's the phrase? Education is not accomplished by putting something into man. Its purpose is to draw out of man the wisdom which is latent within him. And earlier, in the same description about Bartholomew, this is the quality of the imaginative faculty. So he is equating wisdom with the imaginative faculty. That's interesting.
That is. And you know what I love about this so far is that he's talking about discipline. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we all have these faculties to some degree.
Right.
But have we called these faculties to discipleship? Do we discipline ourselves with these faculties? Are they honed and focused and practiced? Because that's what we talk about all the time on this podcast, is doing these things so that we can have that extreme focus that's necessary.
Yeah.
Practicing them, not just talking about them, not just knowing about them, but actually practicing them. And that's what I see Neville kind of doing in this chapter, is saying that when we bring this faculty and we discipline it.
Absolutely.
So I really think this is interesting.
I love the phrase you used, extreme focus. That is a beautiful, beautiful phrase. It really captures in 2 words what is really at the root of everything we're trying to learn here. We're trying to learn that extreme focus, that focus that is so honed, that is so targeted, that is so sinless in the sense of hitting the mark. It is the ideal focus. That's what we're aiming for, and it is extreme. It takes quite a bit of effort to learn it, and it takes quite a bit of determination to stay with it and to stay on it.
But you know, it's laser focus, and it's like you were using the example that goes right in line with Neville of hitting the target, hitting the bullseye.
Yep.
And it's like anybody that can hit the bullseye, you know, over and over and over again is practiced. And has probably practiced a lot to get there, right? If you talk to any marksman, if you talk to an archer, and they're consistently hitting that target, it's because they do this day in and day out, and they have a trained eye, and they have that muscle memory, and they're practiced at it. And sometimes we don't practice at all, and then we don't understand why it's not working.
Boy, so you just summarized about half of the posts on Facebook. You realize that?
No, I'm not looking at. I can't look. I don't even have Facebook open because I can't.
No, I mean just in general. That's what most of the posts are by people who aren't practicing. or who are practicing only minimally. Like, okay, I tried it once, I've done it now, you know.
Got it. So Neville says this whole chapter is about discipline and having these qualities in a disciplined form. So the seventh one is called Thomas. This discipline quality doubts or denies every rumor and suggestion that are not in harmony with that which Simon Peter has been commanded to let enter. I love this. The man who is conscious of being healthy, not because of inherited health or diets or climate, but because he is awakened and knows the state of consciousness in which he lives, will, in spite of the conditions of the world, continue to express health. He could hear through the press, radio, and wise men of the world that a plague was sweeping through the earth, and yet he would remain unmoved and unimpressed. Thomas, the doubter, when disciplined, would deny that sickness or anything else which was not in sympathy with the consciousness to which he belonged had any power to affect him. This quality of denial, when disciplined, protects man from receiving impressions that are not in harmony with his nature. He adopts an attitude of total indifference to all suggestions that are foreign to that which he desires to express. Disciplined denial is not a fight or a struggle, but total indifference. And that's a skill.
Well, it is a skill. And you know what he reminds me of when he's talking like that? He reminds me of doctors, nurses, people who expose themselves to contagious diseases and don't contract the disease. Because their mind just doesn't let it happen. Their mind simply won't go there. They won't accept it.
They can't have it.
Yeah.
They can't have it because then they can't work, so they don't.
Yeah. Like he says, like Thomas would deny that sickness or anything else which was not in sympathy with the consciousness to which he belonged had any power to affect him.
Right.
That's the best kind of denial there is, isn't it?
Yes. And sometimes we have to make a formal denial of something. We have to verbalize it and say, no, this isn't going to happen. Right? I'm denying the power of this thing to affect me. Matthew, the eighth, is the gift of God. This quality of the mind reveals man's desires as gifts of God. The man who has called this disciple into being knows that every desire of his heart is a gift from heaven, and that it contains both the power and the plan of its self-expression. Such a man never questions the manner of its expression. He knows that the plan of expression is never revealed to man, for God's ways are past finding out. He fully accepts his desires as gifts already received, and goes his way in peace, confident that they shall appear. That's a really lovely one there, because what that is saying is that he's not worried about the house. Right.
Yes. That's
he right? And he's not wondering about is this something I should really want? Is it possible? He just knows.
Yes. It actually could be described as certainty. What he's describing here is the feeling and the power of certainty, and it doesn't matter what the evidence of the sentence is, just certain.
And knowing that the desire is the confirmation that it's going to happen.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
I love that. I've kind of gotten to that point lately myself, where when I begin to desire something, I get excited.
That's great. When that happens, when you get like that, that's fabulous.
Because I automatically know if I'm wanting it, it's on its way. And that's a really cool thing to experience.
Well, that comes from the practice you were talking about. We have to practice. We have to keep practicing and practicing and practicing, laser targeting on that bullseye. And if you do, you get to the point where you get the experience that you're talking about.
So we've got up to 8. The 9th disciple is called James, the son of Alphaeus. This is the quality of discernment. A clear and ordered mind is the voice which calls the disciple into being. This faculty perceives that which is not revealed to the eye of man. This disciple judges not from appearances, for it has the capacity to function in the realm of causes, and so is never misled by appearance. Clairvoyance is the faculty which is awakened when this quality is developed and disciplined. Not the clairvoyance of the mediumistic seance rooms, but the true clairvoyance or clear seeing of the mystic. That is, this aspect of the mind has the capacity to interpret that which is seen. Discernment, or the capacity to diagnose, is the quality of James, the son of Alphaeus. I like that he's mentioning discernment because I think it's a really important quality to develop. And that way we can understand direction, because we do hear a lot of voices in the world.
No kidding.
We do have a lot of people saying different things and maybe, advising us in different ways. And so when we have the discernment and we can recognize what the truth is for us, I think that's important.
I think that discernment comes from the practice. The more that we practice, the more discerning we become, right? So practice, once again, becomes a big portion of what it is to be, which character is this? This is James. Yeah, being James is, once again, about practice.
Yeah, because we have to be willing to fail.
Yes.
Right? We do.
True.
I remember hearing somebody say, anything worth learning how to do well is worth learning how to do at the beginning. And so many times people give up. And I know I was like this when I was younger with certain things because fortunately or unfortunately, I was born with certain talents that seemed really easy to me, like artistic talent and musical talent just came to me really easy. And that's wonderful, except that then there were other things when they didn't come so easy, I just didn't want to deal with them. Because I didn't want to keep falling down, so I'm not an athlete. But, but I think that that's the part of discernment, like you said, that comes with practice. And so, we're going to have times when we miss the mark. We're going to have times when we don't, hear correctly and misunderstand, or we think we've got an intuitive hit and it turns out to be something else. And it's okay. That's how you learn.
And it's also okay because it's part of having choice about deciding what we're going to prefer and what we're not going to prefer. So if your preference is to focus on those things that come easy to you, you can just focus on the things that come easy to you. Preference is to stretch your mind and experience a little bit and focus on the stuff that comes hard to you, well, then that's where your preference is. So you can focus on it's preference. It's all about what we prefer.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. All right, ready for 10?
I think we are.
Thaddeus, the 10th, is the disciple of praise, a quality in which the undisciplined man is woefully lacking. When this quality of praise and thanksgiving is awake within man, he walks with the words, "Thank you, Father," ever on his lips. He knows that his thanks for things not seen opens the windows of heaven and permits gifts beyond his capacity to receive to be poured upon him. The man who is not thankful for things received is not likely to be the recipient of many gifts from the same source. Until this quality of mind is disciplined, man will not see the desert blossom as the rose. Praise and thanksgiving are to the invisible gifts of God, one's desires, what rain and sun are to the unseen seeds in the bosom of the earth. So he's telling us here that when we're grateful, it's like rain on the seeds of desire. It's going to make those desires blossom. And what I think is interesting and what I love about this is even though he's giving this idea from in the context of a certain religion, but the phrase that I know from another religion has to do with ask once and say thank you 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of thing he's talking about is that we want to open our capacity and we do that, he says, walks with the words, "Thank you, Father," ever on his lips. So gratitude plays an important part here. He calls it praise, but goes on to really explain gratitude and thanks.
Thanksgiving, yeah. In fact, as you were reading that, I am mindful of something that I've noticed quite a bit lately, both in my life and in the discussions that I've had with you and other co-hosts, is how negligent we are at celebrating the things that go right in life, because those are the opportunities to be thankful. And it happens so frequently. So many times, so often, we are kind of conditioned to just skip over the good things when they happen. So when something goes right, we say, we treat it like it was supposed to go right. Not that it's something to be appreciated or to feel good about. We just it's like, we'll dismiss that because, okay, well, that was supposed to go right, so we'll just leave that alone. No, you have to celebrate it. That's what true Thanksgiving is.
That's why I love this metaphor.
Yeah, it's great.
Praise and thanksgiving are to the invisible gifts of God, which he says are one's desires. Mm-hmm. What rain and sun are to the unseen seeds in the bosom of the earth. So praise and thanksgiving is actually the thing that's watering my desire, right, my seeds of desire to come forth. So we want to make sure that we're doing it. I almost killed my African violet last week. It's huge. It's the biggest violet I've ever seen. You might be able to see it back there. Mm-hmm. And it has a pot that fills with water, and it waters from the bottom. And the bigger it gets, the faster it drinks. And I hadn't watered it for a while, and I came in, and all the leaves were just laying all over the table. Just like completely flat and limp and laying down over the pot. And I started apologizing to it because I hadn't realized that it was empty of water. And so I went, filled it with water, and I came back later and it was still droopy, and I came back the next day and it still was droopy, and I came back the next morning and it was all perky. It was like beautiful, and I was so thankful that I hadn't killed this plant, right? And it reminds me of that. If we recognize, like, I had the thought in my mind, oh gosh, I can't let that happen. I have to make sure it has water. If we had the faculty of mind to think that way about the things that we're desiring, instead of complaining about not having them yet, if we were watering those desires with gratitude towards all the stuff that is going right, towards all the things that we do have, it would make such a big difference.
Louise and I had an example of that just last night that I'm remembering. It's spring, and the gardening season started on April 1st, and so we're starting to bring the customers in and do the initial surveys and see what people need for their gardening openings and so forth. We're starting to working only with existing customers. We aren't even trying to take on new customers because there's so many existing customers to take care of. But she told me, we got a call from so and so. They decided to go ahead with opening the garden this year, and it's a good sized client. And I said, oh, good. And then we just kind of left it there. And a moment later, I said to myself, we didn't celebrate that. Yeah. We acknowledged that it was good, and then just kind of let it drop. And so I said to her, we got to celebrate that. And so we just did a little dance, and we celebrated, like, yay, hooray, all right, way to go.
Excellent.
But you have to be mindful. You have to notice that kind of stuff is happening and say, wait a minute, this is the good stuff. This is what we got to get excited about. So we'll get more of it.
That's right. We're really good at, like, uncelebrating things when they don't go right.
Uncelebrating, good word.
All right, so the 11th quality called is Simon of Canaan. A good key phrase for this disciple is hearing good news. Simon of Canaan, or Simon from the land of milk and honey, when called to discipleship, is proof that the one who calls this faculty into being has become conscious of the abundant life. He can say with the psalmist David, Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. This disciplined aspect of the mind is incapable of hearing anything other than good news. And so it's well qualified to preach the gospel or the good spell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, good news. Hearing good news.
Well,
and that's what you were just talking about.
I just told a story of that, of hearing good news and celebrating it. So I guess 10 and 11 kind of go together, don't they? Because one is the quality of praise and the other one is recognizing the good news. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so then the 12th and last of the disciplined qualities of the mind is called Judas. When this quality is awake, man knows that he must die to that which he is before he can become that which he desires to be. So it is said of this disciple that he committed suicide, which is the mystic's way of telling the initiated that Judas is the disciplined aspect of detachment. This one knows that his I am or consciousness is his savior, so he lets all other saviors go. This quality, when disciplined, gives one the strength to let go. The man who has called Judas into being has learned how to take his attention away from problems or limitations and to place it upon that which is the solution or savior. Except you be born again, you cannot in any wise enter the kingdom of God. No greater love has man than this, that he gave his life for a friend. When man realizes that the quality desired, if realized, would save and befriend him, he willingly gives up his life, his present conception of himself, for his friend, by detaching his consciousness from that which he is conscious of being, and assuming the consciousness of that which he desires to be. Judas, one whom the world in its ignorance have blackened, will, when man awakes from his undisciplined state, be placed on high, for God is love, and no greater love has a man than this, that he lay down his life for a friend. Until man lets go of that which he is now conscious of being, he will not become that which he desires to be. And Judas is the one who accomplishes this through suicide or detachment. These are the 12 qualities which were given to man in the foundation of the world. Man's duty is to raise them to the level of discipleship. When this is accomplished, man will say, I've finished the work which thou gavest me to do. I've glorified thee on the earth, and now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before the world was. So,
Right.
Detachment.
Yeah. Very big way to
Not being attached to the outcome.
Yes. And very specifically, not only not being detached to the outcome, but detachment as a way of moving from where I am now to where I want to be next. In other words, it's a step-by-step process. So I want to be there, detached from here, and I'm there. I want to be to the next place, detached from there, and go to the next place. Detached.
We are so attached.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We are so attached to our current identity.
Mm-hmm.
We're so attached to our stuff.
Yeah.
And our lives and the things we love and the things we do and who we think we are. We're very, very attached. So in order to move into a space where we are someone else who has different things and opportunities, we have to be able to detach from who we are now. And that's not an easy thing to do.
No, and it's no wonder it's the 12th one, because it's in many ways the most difficult one. It really is.
Yeah.
It's probably the most difficult one of all. I mean, it took me 20 years to detach long enough so I could meet my wife, so it gives you an idea of how tough it was for me. So
I just want to recap the 12 qualities.
Yes.
Hearing or faith in self, courage, judgment that's just, love, recognition that I am, imagination, denial, desire, recognizing that desire is a gift, discernment, praise and gratitude, hearing only good news, and being able to be detached from the outcome and detached from current identity. We did it!
We did. We got through the chapter. And what a chapter it was. I mean, true Neville style in all of its ways, but wow. Some good stuff in there. Stuff I may have to go reread this one just because it has a lot of stuff going on in it. If I want to understand it in totality, because that's the thing. This is a totality chapter. He's asking you to adopt all of this, not just little pieces of it, but to adopt all of it. Yeah, that's pretty big.
Yeah. It's a lifetime of progress.
Well, it is. That's true, but nevertheless, it's still worth studying. Just a couple of reminders. First of all, if you're not yet a subscriber, become a subscriber by visiting the homepage, allthewaytoday.net. The instructions are right there. Big thing for you to click on. You can't miss it, and it'll be right for your device. Click it, walk through the steps, and like that, you're a subscriber. And then once you're subscribed and listening, make sure that you're sharing so that everybody else knows how they can get their daily dose of happy, because that's how we spread the word. And speaking of spreading word, how do we also spread the word about Cindy Chavez, the great life coach from Louisiana? How do we find out where to reach Cindy?
Well, you can find me online at my website, cindychavez.com. It's CINDIECHAVEZ.com. There's a contact form there and lots of good stuff, some good free stuff too. I would love to have you drop by and give me a shout.
Beautiful. Love it. That's what we like every time. So this has been great. Neville Day is once again has not disappointed at all. It's been wonderful. And I'm looking forward
Happy Neville Day.
Yeah, happy Neville Day to everyone. We thank you to our live stream listeners. Thank you to our podcast listeners as well. And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.